Tommy Jaggi of FanSided here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher to talk about some of the biggest moves around the NFL, Marcus, as we prepare for free agency. It's just around the corner. We're going to get the legal tampering period. We're already seeing some massive roster moves. Trent McDuffie traded in a blockbuster move. We're going to talk about the Bears trading DJ Moore just recently. Maxx Crosby, is he on the move? And then some of the big releases around the NFL. Kyler Murray, Stefon Diggs. Lots to talk about, Marcus, today before we dive into free agency. What are your overall thoughts on what's happening right now around the league?
First of all, I laugh anytime anybody says legal tampering because that's an oxymoron, right? Like we know these we know these teams have been tampering for a while now, and it just becomes official on Monday. But I think you're already seeing teams try to get ahead of free agency because, I think a team like Buffalo knows that they might not be able to offer Alec Pierce $27-28 million a year. So rather than waiting, let's go out and get a deal done now. We'll talk about the DJ Moore trade in a little bit, but I expect this to be a very active and newsy free agency period.
Let's start right with the McDuffie trade, Marcus, because this is a deal that we knew that the Chiefs were in financial trouble. Like everybody was well aware of that. We didn't know that they were going to be trading one of their best players away to a contending team, the LA Rams. And so I want to get your thoughts on who is the early winner here. But this was not a cheap deal for the Rams, who not only had to trade a first-round pick, a fifth and a sixth this year, and then a third-round pick next year. Now you're also going to turn around and make Trent McDuffie, a 25-year-old cornerback. You're going to make him probably a $30 million corner. You're going to make him record numbers here. How do you feel about this for both sides?
I think this is the one instance where both teams win the trade. Let's start with the Rams. The Rams are in a Super Bowl window. I mean, they were the second best team in the NFL last year. In fact, they were maybe the best team in the league for a long portion. And they know that time is running out with Matt Stafford. So they've got these two first-round picks, 13 and 29. They ended up trading one for a proven guy right now that I think is going to fit their defense really well. They were able to retain Chris Shula. They brought in Quentin Lake to be their defensive back coach. McDuffie is going to be a massive upgrade, and it costs them a lot. But at pick 29, you can't just sit there and hope that a good defensive player falls to you. They want to win the next 2 years, and this is the best cornerback on the market. I totally get it from the Rams' point.
Yeah, and for, I would say 28 or maybe 29 other NFL teams, Marcus, I would stand back and say, what are you doing with this trade? But I agree with you. For the Rams, it makes sense. I mean, they were that close from getting over the hump and punching their ticket, getting to the Super Bowl last year. I think that they are right on the cusp of doing that. We saw them win a Super Bowl a few years back with Matt Stafford, with Sean McVay. They're just as talented now as they were then. We were to keep Chris Shula for another year. And so I think this win now moves makes sense for a team who, by the way, made a bunch of win now moves back when they were in that previous Super Bowl window, and they won a Super Bowl because of it. So they literally have the example of what's been working.
Yeah, and now they've filled their biggest need, right? Not only did they fill it, they've got an awesome player who can play in the slot and on the outside. They've got somebody who can match up with Jackson Smith-Njigba, a guy that gave them a lot of problems this year. And they still have the 13th overall pick. Now, I think they're going to use that pick to draft a player. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an offensive player, whether that's someone like Mekhi Lemon or Kenyon Sadiq, but I already thought the Rams should have been the favorites in the NFC going into the year. Now you add McDuffie, you add another player here in the draft at 13. There's no reason why this team shouldn't be in the NFC Championship game again next season.
You talk about the rich getting richer. If they were able to land Mekhi Lemon and just a surplus of wide receiver talent there. Obviously, we don't know what the future holds for Devontae Adams beyond the 2026 season. But boy, you talk about just hoarding wide receiver talent and giving themselves a great shot to compete right now. Marcus, from the Chiefs side of things, I actually love this for Kansas City. I wrote an article on Arrowhead Addict about why I think that they are the early winners of this trade overall. I do think that this is one of those rare occasions where both sides wins, but the Chiefs were backed into a corner. Like, what could they do? Their finances are terrible right now. They're still in the salary cap hole, even after that trade. And so they needed to ditch some contracts. Not only were they able to do that, knowing with their other teams knowing that it needed to be done, they were still able to get top dollar In return, when you're talking about a first and then 3 other draft picks in the compensation with that, including a 3rd rounder next year. I love this for the Chiefs, who can now have 2 first-round picks to go and kind of reset this roster a little bit. We talked about how they were getting old. Trent McDuffie obviously wasn't old. He wasn't the problem, but they needed to get younger. They certainly needed to get cheaper. They were able to do that, and now you've got 2 first-round picks to play with in the draft this year.
Yeah, and this isn't the first time that we've seen the Chiefs trade away a Pro Bowl cornerback to the Rams. They did it, was it in 2018 when they traded Marcus Peters? This is what they do. They draft these Washington cornerbacks. They go on to have awesome careers, and then they trade them for high draft capital. So I love this move for Kansas City because now it sets them up to take the best player available at 9. Maybe that's Mansour Delane. You get a cheaper version of McDuffie. Maybe it's an offensive tackle. Maybe it's a wide receiver, but they've got more draft capital. And this is what they really needed to do, is rebuild this roster with cheap contracts. They're not going to be a Super Bowl contender in 2026 with Patrick Mahomes coming off that ACL injury and rebuilding this roster. I think this is about trying to extend the window for Patrick Mahomes in 2027 and beyond. And this is how you do it. You get a surplus of draft picks and you start rebuilding the roster overall.
I couldn't agree more. They're kind of taking the anti-Saints approach here a little bit. And I mean, to be fair, they've done some work with contracts that have kind of put them in this hole to begin with, but finally starting to get out of that. They can see light at the end of the tunnel. You can see kind of the next era, at least in development here. And obviously Patrick Mahomes is still young enough that he's going to be a part of that and a major part of that. Marcus, let's talk about the Bears trading DJ Moore to the Buffalo Bills. And what was originally reported kind of sound like a win for Buffalo. But now that we're hearing, like, we're talking about a 2nd round pick here, and we're talking about a couple of years of guaranteed money that the Bills can't get out of. Like, what can you give us some details on this trade as it unfolds?
Yeah. So let's start with the contract, because I think this is the big thing. So his 2026 and 2027 seasons are going to be fully guaranteed at $24.5 million. That came out from Adam Schefter today. There was also a tweet that came out a little bit before we recorded this podcast that the Bills guaranteed $15.5 million of DJ Moore's 2028 base salary. So this is a guy that is under contract for the next 3 years in Buffalo. He's going to be 29 coming up. He believes he's going into this is year 9 for DJ Moore. Buffalo needed a wide receiver, and I'm guessing they felt like they weren't going to be able to get a quality receiver at the end of the 1st round or in the 2nd round. DJ Moore has got experience with Joe Brady from their time in Carolina. Now you pair him with Khalil Shakir, you have more viable options in your passing game. But giving up a 2nd round pick and guaranteeing that much salary, that is a lot to stomach here.
That's a lot, and it kind of reminds me of the DK Metcalf deal a little bit last year with the Steelers. You're giving a 2nd round pick, and you're committing to a big contract for at least 2 seasons. Marcus, I think this deal would have made more sense if it was after year 5 or year 6 for DJ Moore. I mean, in 2023, he had nearly 1,400 yards. The problem is 3 of the last 4 seasons, he's failed to reach the 1,000-yard mark. Last year, despite starting all 17 games, 682 yards and 6 touchdowns. It just doesn't seem like the compensation aligns with what Buffalo is getting now. And that's not to say that he couldn't go to the Bills, play with Josh Allen, and go back up to being a 1,200-yard receiver. But this is a steep price, no doubt.
Yeah, and some of the rumors are that New England was also in the trade market here, and they were exploring, and that's why it had to be a 2nd and not a 3rd round pick. I don't know how much I believe that. I think Brandon Beane and the Bills have been desperate for a viable receiver, and the fit, because we know he works well with Joe Brady. We know it's going to be a lot of underneath passes, and you need guys that can make plays after the catch. It's why they did it. But Buffalo's in a really tough cap situation. Like, this is going to be their one big move. They're not going to be active in free agency. Now you only have 1 pick inside of the top 80 selections. And that's their 1st round pick. This is more or less the team that Buffalo is going to have going into the season. And frankly, it's not going to be enough. Like, they're better on offense, but it's not going to be good enough to compete against the really good teams. I'm struggling to see the vision here for Buffalo.
Yeah, and we talked about Buffalo being another one of those AFC teams that desperately needs a youth infusion, and they might not be able to get that now in free agency because they'll be so cap strapped And it just makes you wonder, would they have been better off not going the rookie receiver route? And of course, you leave something to chance there, not knowing what you're getting. I get it from a sense, Marcus, that they've got Josh Allen in the best years of his career. They want to make a splash right now, but this team has plenty of other holes too, and that's the issue.
And I understand it. Understand not wanting to go the rookie route, because if you're drafting, I think they're at like 27 or 28. Are you going to be drafting the fifth or sixth best receiver in this class?
Yeah.
Maybe. And they've tried that route with other receivers, and it just takes too long for these guys to develop. They feel like they are in a Super Bowl window right now in Josh Allen's prime. And even DJ Moore, as expensive as he is probably going to be more productive than a late round one receiver. I get it from that standpoint. I hate how much they gave up to go get him.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're stomaching the double gut punch of the high draft capital and the big contract. The Bills are in it to win it right now, and credits the Bears for being able to get that second round pick out of a really pricey player and now having more money to work with on their end. Marcus, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders and Maxx Crosby, a union that seems to be no more, and Crosby is done. And so you believe a trade is going to happen this offseason, correct? And can you give us some names that might be fits for him?
Yeah, I think it's imminent too. Like, I think this is going to happen before free agency. And the reason why is because Las Vegas has got a bunch of cap space, right? And they've got a team that's going to be rebuilding under Clint Kubiak and Fernando Mendoza. And I just don't think the timelines are going to line up with Maxx Crosby, who's going to be 29 in August. You're better off trading him now, getting the draft capital, reinvesting it into your offensive line, use your free agency dollars to sign guys like Tyler Linderbaum to boost up that offensive line, and then see how quickly you can get the offense to be functional before you worry about the defense. And I think for Crosby, he just wants out. I think he feels like he put in his time in Las Vegas. I don't think he necessarily likes the ownership or the GM, John Spytek. So now he wants to go play where he can compete for, division titles and Super Bowls. And that's just not going to be Las Vegas anytime soon. And we're already hearing teams like the Chicago Bears and the Dallas Cowboys and the Los Angeles Rams all sniffing around. I think ultimately, Tommy, it's going to be like a first and another day 2 pick and maybe a player that gets it done. I know the Raiders were asking for a Micah Parsons type of package. I just don't think they're going to get that.
Nor should they. Micah was younger, just a better player overall. It from the Raiders standpoint, makes perfect sense. Like you already outlined it. The window's not going to line up. This is the start of their rebuild. They've got a young, innovative head coach in there in Clint Kubiak. They're going to have the number 1 overall pick, quarterback Fernando Mendoza. Like, this is the perfect time to turn the page on a player who's going to be entering his 30s here in the near future and get a ton of draft capital out of him. I think the problem that a lot of teams have, Marcus, is they're a little late to the punch. And in teams that are willing to trade players a year too late, you'll get half the draft capital. And so now's the time to do it. Makes sense for the Raiders. But I do think the team on the receiving end here, if the asking price is the asking price, we're talking about just a handful of teams maximum that can justify doing something like this for Maxx Crosby, who's going to be 29 years old this year. That is a lot of draft capital. That is a big contract to take on. And I think it's respectable in terms to in respect to his peers, TJ Watt, and some of the other even bigger contracts out there. But again, you're talking about the double gut punch. Which team does it make the most sense for, in your opinion?
I mean, outside of like a team like the Rams, which I still think the Rams are interested in doing this because they're going all in, I think Chicago makes a ton of sense. And I think it makes even more sense now that they've completed this DJ Moore trade, because they get off the DJ Moore contract, they add another second round pick, and maybe you trade a first and a third and you keep that second round pick. You add Maxx Crosby to that defense that was a sieve at points last year. He's an awesome run defender. He can still be productive as a pass rusher. It's not going to be a great defense, but that's okay. Chicago was a couple plays away from beating the Rams last year and advancing to the NFC Championship game. You have got Caleb Williams on a rookie contract. This is the time to strike. And if Maxx Crosby is available for anything less than 2 first-round picks, I fully expect the Bears to be the team that acquires him.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we thought the Bears made strides in 2025, look what they can do in 2026 if you add a blue chip player to your defense like that. You are tuned into Stacking the Box, where NFL fans come to talk, celebrate, and debate. For more coverage, hit up fansided.com, powered by the passionate fans at FanSided. Make sure you're checking out all of the great NFL content on fansided.com and the FanSided NFL Network. All right, Marcus, let's talk about Kyler Murray here. Big hot market name that is released now by the Arizona Cardinals. I would imagine there would be lots of teams in pursuit of Kyler. Everybody needs a quarterback. Now, we can talk about his faults, his shortcomings, the lack of production over the past 4 seasons. This number 1 overall pick is the top quarterback market out there, a prospect out there. There's no question. And he's going to come with a remarkably cheap contract on a veteran minimum deal because Arizona is already paying his $36.8 million salary this year.
Yeah, there's offset money. So this is very similar to the Russell Wilson deal a couple of years ago, where once Denver cut him, he was available to the entire league on a veteran minimum contract. Now you could sign him to a long-term deal, but I don't think that makes sense for Kyler. I think he wants to go somewhere where he can play well and then see if he can get another deal. What's fascinating about this is because he's on a vet minimum contract, this is going to be teams just recruiting because there's going to be no difference in what these teams can offer, right? So if you're a team like Pittsburgh that might need a quarterback, you need to convince Kyler that this is a better situation than going to Miami or going to the Jets or going to the Browns. But I even think teams that don't have a quarterback need right now, like if you're Kyle Shanahan in the 49ers, maybe you trade Mac Jones and you tell Kyler, hey, come play in our system, or we will rebuild your value like we did with Sam Darnold and Mac Jones. Come learn here, and then you'll get a shot next year to go out and make big money. I wouldn't be surprised if he does that as well. So I think you're going to see 20 to 25 teams be in on Kyler Murray because it costs you nothing to acquire him.
Yeah, Steelers, if you're in on Kyler, please do not show him your report card that you got this offseason from the NFLPA. No, I mean, Kyler, who wouldn't want that? I mean, again, we can talk about the personality and just likes playing video games. I don't care. You get a guy for $1.3 million. That is cheap. That's cheaper than the Steelers long snapper. And so it makes perfect sense to bring him in. And if he's not the guy, then fine, you move on. If he is, then you have what you're looking for. And it is, I mean, credit to him. He's going to be able to dictate his own situation with lots of choices out there. And we'll see. I mean, he's entering age 29 season. We've seen quarterbacks revamp their careers before. He certainly has the talent to do so.
Let me ask you this. If you're Kyler, which of these 2 situations would you rather go to? Would you rather go to Minnesota, where you're competing or probably starting over J.J. McCarthy with Kevin O'Connell? Or do you go to a division that's a little less tough, that plays more nice weather games in Atlanta and join Kevin Stefanski, and you play with Drake London and Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts?
Ooh. That is tough. I'm such a believer in Kevin O'Connell still, even with the disaster that was.
It's a much harder division, though. Much harder.
It is. The division is much harder. So I can get both sides of the argument there. For Kyler's purposes, maybe it's less about having the playoff berth this year and more about what the numbers could align with and what kind of contract you can get next year. But I think that's an interesting argument. Which one would you go with there?
I think I would go with Atlanta. First of all, you're just playing a lot of domes. And I think that offense is set up well. They just need a functional quarterback with, I mean, they're going to be able to run the ball like crazy. London's a really good downfield receiver. That's where I would like to see Kyler end up. And I think that's where he could rebuild his value.
All right, Marcus, let's talk about Stefon Diggs here getting released from the New England Patriots. Diggs had an impressive season. I mean, 85 receptions for over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. He played all 17 games, averaged nearly 10 yards per target. But the issue with Diggs isn't the play. The issue is he's got some legal stuff going on in the background here too. How big of a distraction is that going to be? What does it mean for his future, Marcus, and where do you expect him to land?
Yeah, so a couple things on Diggs. I think he actually played pretty well last year. Like he had a much better bounce back season than I think any of us anticipated. But the Patriots had to decide by, I think it was March 10th, whether or not they wanted to guarantee $22 million to him in 2026. And I think they just felt like You know, that's too big of a risk considering the off-field stuff. And I think he's 32 years old right now.
Mm-hmm.
You could spend that money. Maybe you take that $22 million in savings and you spend it on Alec Pierce in free agency. You spend it on Rashid Shaheed, whatever you needed to do. You could also go get a lot younger at the position. I think from just all the rumors that we're hearing is that they've also been in the trade market. They're looking to add a guy like A.J. Brown, and they probably just felt like we don't want to pay for past production. It's better that we just move on now rather than moving on a year from now when things could get really ugly. I still think Diggs can play. I just don't think he needs to be a number one receiver anymore. I think he needs to be a low-end wide receiver too. Like, honestly, I'll give you a situation. If he goes to Atlanta with Kyler and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and he's the second receiver there, I think that's a wonderful fit. So I do think Stefon Diggs still has value.
Yeah, and from the Patriots standpoint, I totally understand moving on. As close as you were to that Super Bowl last year, you couldn't risk going forward with that, not knowing the situation is going to be. And Marcus, one more thing before we sign off on today's show. Free agency coming up in just a few days. Give me a big name that you're interested in watching to see where he goes.
Trey Hendrickson. I mean, at this time last year, the Bengals had multiple offers to trade him. He made $30 million on a one-year deal. I still think he can play. I know he's getting up there in age a little bit. He's kind of, more of just a pass rusher. But I think for these teams that maybe miss out on Maxx Crosby, I think he can be a very valuable asset. I'm very curious to see where Trey Hendrickson ends up.
Absolutely. You don't see players like that hitting the market too often here. All right. This is the Stacking the Box podcast. It premieres Tuesday and Thursday evenings on YouTube. Be sure to check it out. You can follow Marcus on X at Marcus_Mosher. You can follow me on X at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Stacking the Box podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube, and you can follow my written work on stillcurtain.com, Marcus's written work on the FanSided NFL Network, and be sure to check out fansided.com for your daily sports news and opinions. And thanks again for listening to Stacking the Box.